I've never really been one to make a scene. Most of my life, I've coasted through social situations quietly, choosing peace over pettiness, silence over snark. I grew up in a family where conflict was solved with long sighs and passive-aggressive glances across the dinner table, not with yelling or storming out. So when I married into a family that seemed to treat drama like oxygen, necessary, ever-present, and loud, I figured I could just keep my head down and smile through it. My name's Marcus, I'm 33, and up until a few years ago, I genuinely believed that keeping my mouth shut was the mature thing to do. I thought enduring the snide remarks and subtle jabs was a kind of quiet strength. But what they don't tell you is that there's a fine line between keeping the peace and letting people walk all over you. And that line, well, I didn't even realize I'd crossed it until the night of our anniversary dinner, when my mother-in-law lifted her wine glass, smirked at me over the rim, and mocked my entire existence like I was some failed audition for her daughter's future. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start with the basics. I met Emily when I was 26 and she was 24. We were both working at the same tech startup in Chicago, me in product design, her in marketing. She had this laugh that carried across the office like a song you didn't know you loved until it was gone. We clicked fast. Movie nights turned into sleepovers, sleepovers turned into shared furniture, and before long, we were signing a lease and building IKEA desks together in our first shoebox apartment. I loved her. Still do. But loving someone doesn't mean their family will automatically love you back. And Emily's family, well, let's just say they come from a different planet than I do. Her mother, Diane, is the kind of woman who wears heels in her own house and acts like every gathering is a Vogue cover shoot. Her hair has never once looked undone. Her opinion is always the loudest in the room. And she carries herself like she's permanently auditioning for a role as rich lady who owns a vineyard in some mid-tier Netflix drama. Then there's her dad, Greg, quiet, balding, and always checking his watch like he's counting down the minutes until he can sneak away with a whiskey and the Golf Channel. He's not cruel, just absent. A ghost at most family events, physically present but emotionally buffering. Emily says he's always been like that, gentle, disengaged, a man who lost all his fight sometime around the birth of their second daughter. And finally, there's Courtney, Emily's older sister. If Diane is a queen bee, Courtney is the heir apparent. She married a lawyer named Brad who wears loafers with no socks and talks like he's being filmed for a TED Talk. They have a baby named Jasper who is, apparently, the future of humanity if you ask Diane. And they never let you forget it. Now, I don't come from money. I'm the son of a public school teacher and a mechanic. My parents are wonderful people, humble and honest, but we grew up watching every penny. When I proposed to Emily, I did it with a modest ring I paid off over 5 months, and she said yes with tears in her eyes. I knew she didn't care about the money, but I also knew her family would. The first time I met Diane, she looked me up and down like I was a dusty handbag in a designer store. She shook my hand with 2 fingers and asked, "And what exactly do you do, Marcus?" Not how I was doing, not who I was as a person, just what brand label I wore in the form of a job title. When I told her I worked in product design for a small firm, she smiled thinly and said, "Oh, so you draw things." Emily squeezed my hand under the table. I smiled through it. Over the years, I got used to the way Diane would always mention Nathan whenever we were at a family dinner. Nathan was Emily's high school boyfriend, some golden boy finance bro who'd gone on to found a startup in Silicon Valley and apparently made his first million by 28. Diane adored him. She once told Emily, in front of me, "You two were just so perfect together." I still have that Christmas card he sent us. He looked so handsome in that suit. I bit my tongue. Emily rolled her eyes and said, "Mom, that was over 10 years ago. Let it go." But Diane didn't let things go. Ever. If anything, she collected grudges and passive-aggressive comments like they were souvenirs from vacations she never actually enjoyed. The little things started adding up. We'd bring a bottle of wine to a family gathering and Diane would say, "Oh, how sweet. You brought a gift from Trader Joe's." I try to talk to Brad about sports and he'd blink at me and say, "Do people still watch football?" As if he was confused that commoners still existed. And every time I tried to contribute to a conversation about work or politics or parenting, I'd get these condescending nods from Courtney like I was a kid trying to sit at the adult table. Emily always defended me. But the truth is, she was caught in the middle. She loved her family. And she loved me. And sometimes those two worlds felt like continents drifting apart. Still, we made it work. We carved out a life for ourselves, slowly and carefully, with weekend hikes, shared Spotify playlists, and matching mugs that said his and hers in fonts so cheesy we hid them when guests came over. We weren't flashy. We were real. So when our 5-year wedding anniversary came around, I wanted to celebrate it properly. I made a reservation at a quiet Italian place we both loved. One of those tucked-away spots where the pasta tastes like someone's grandmother is in the back whispering secrets to the dough. But when Emily suggested we invite her family to join us, just for dessert, she said, they really want to celebrate with us. I hesitated. I wasn't in the mood to be patronized over panna cotta. Still, I said yes. Because I loved her. Because maybe this time would be different. Because I still believed, somewhere deep down, that I could win her family over, not with money, but with consistency. With decency. So I wore a blazer. I made sure my shoes were clean. I practiced small talk in the car. And for the first 40 minutes, it actually went okay. Diane complimented Emily's dress. Greg didn't say much, but he at least made eye contact. Courtney showed me a photo of Jasper drooling on a watermelon slice and didn't follow it up with a lecture on organic baby food. For once, it felt tolerable. Until the wine came out. One glass turned into two. Diane's volume rose with each sip. The waitress brought out a tiny anniversary cake with 5 wonderful years piped in chocolate, and everyone clapped. It was nice. I exhaled. Maybe this wasn't so bad after all. And then, just as I was reaching for a bite of tiramisu, Diane leaned back in her chair, gave this theatrical little laugh, and said this sentence that would change everything. It's cute how you try so hard on that salary. My daughter could have married Nathan. You know, the millionaire. And then she chuckled. So did Courtney. Even Brad smiled into his drink. For a split second, the table was quiet, except for the sound of my fork clinking back onto the plate. I looked across the table at Emily. Her face had gone pale, her eyes wide, and that's when I said it. For words. Calm, steady. No yelling. No drama. But they made Diane freeze mid-laugh and drop her wine glass right onto her plate. It shattered, and that's where everything began to unravel. She dropped her wine glass. Not on purpose, either. It slipped from her fingers mid-laugh like her brain hadn't caught up to what her ears just heard. The stem snapped in half when it hit the edge of the plate, and red wine spilled across the tablecloth like a crime scene. And all I had said were 4 words. I bought this place. That's it. No flourish. No grand announcement. Just a quiet statement of fact. But those 4 words changed the entire atmosphere of the room. Courtney's smile vanished. Brad stopped mid-sip. Greg, for the first time that evening, looked interested. Diane's eyes flicked to mine, wide, like she was trying to process whether I was joking or if her ears had betrayed her. Emily stared at me. Her hand had frozen halfway to her water glass. Marcus, she said, her voice low, what do you mean? I leaned back in my chair and took my napkin off my lap, setting it beside my untouched dessert. I bought this restaurant, I said, still calm. Last spring. Quietly. I didn't think it was important to bring up, since apparently we're all very concerned with what people make. Diane blinked. You're joking. No, I replied. I'm not. And that was it. That was the exact moment the balance shifted. The moment years of snide remarks, backhanded compliments, and smug grins finally crumbled into stunned silence. But let me tell you something that most people don't realize until it's too late. When entitled people feel their control slipping, they don't go quiet for long. They lash out. They double down. And they get nastier. The silence didn't last. Wait a second, Diane finally said, her voice sharp. You mean you own this place? As in what? You're the landlord. I smiled politely. No, Diane. I'm the owner. I bought out the original owners when they decided to retire. I have a small team that manages day-to-day operations, but I make the decisions. But how? Courtney asked, like I'd told her I sprouted wings. You're just a product designer. Emily said you were working at some design firm. I said. But I left 2 years ago. Started freelancing. I also made a few smart investments back in 2018. Tech stocks, crypto, some startup equity from an old job. Things did well. I kept things quiet because I don't really enjoy talking about money at family dinners. Brad finally chimed in. You mean you've had money this whole time and never said anything? I didn't think it was relevant, I said. Apparently, my job title was enough to decide I wasn't worth listening to. The mood had curdled like milk in the sun. The server came by to check on us and froze when he saw the broken glass. I waved him off gently and said we'd handle it. He looked awkward and backed away. Diane, meanwhile, was still trying to reassemble her ego from the shattered pieces on the table. Emily was quiet beside me. I could feel the tension radiating off her like heat. Her hand found mine under the table, and I squeezed it. Not out of triumph, but because I knew this exact moment, would shift everything for her, too. Diane cleared her throat and gave a brittle little laugh. Well, that's surprising. I mean, good for you, Marcus. Really, but I still think it's important to talk about these things. Transparency is part of being a family. I looked at her, and this time I didn't smile. Funny, you only wanted transparency when you thought I was beneath your daughter. She blinked, and her mouth opened, but nothing came out. That dinner ended shortly after. The check was already paid in advance, by me, of course. But Diane insisted on leaving early, mumbling something about an early brunch. Brad and Courtney followed like ducklings in her wake. Greg nodded at me and muttered, "Nice place," before drifting out like he always did, invisible as fog. Emily and I sat there for another 10 minutes, the candle between us flickering like it was nervous. She didn't say anything at first. Then she sighed and looked at me. "You bought this place and never told me?" I looked back at her. I wasn't hiding it. I just didn't want to make it a thing. I know how your family is. I didn't want them to suddenly respect me because of money. She nodded slowly. "I get that. I do. I wish I'd known." And I understood that. I did. But in my head, something had started to shift, too. A quiet suspicion I hadn't been able to shake since the moment Diane brought up Nathan for the 100th time, in front of me, at our anniversary dinner. It wasn't just favoritism. It was sabotage. I didn't realize how deep it went until the next family gathering. 2 weeks later, we were at Diane's house for Jasper's first birthday. It was one of those ridiculous suburban productions with a hired magician, a bounce house, for babies, mind you, and little personalized gift bags for each kid that probably cost more than my childhood bike. Emily had made cupcakes. I offered to help set up, but Diane told me, "Oh no, we've got it under control, Marcus." Which was code for, "Stay out of the way, peasant." Fine. So I helped carry some extra chairs in from the garage. That's where I overheard the conversation. Diane was in the kitchen with Courtney and Brad. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was literally just passing through. But when I heard my name, I stopped. "He's just doing this to prove a point," Diane was saying. "You can't tell me he just happened to buy that restaurant. He's trying to embarrass us." "I still don't understand how he had that kind of money," Courtney said. "I mean, Emily said they were budgeting for a vacation last year." Brad scoffed. "Probably hiding something. Guys like that don't just invest smart. He probably got lucky or inherited something and is trying to act like he's clever." I stood there, gripping the back of the folding chair in my hand like it might anchor me to the floor. Then Diane said the thing that snapped something inside me. Well, it's not too late for Emily to realize she made a mistake. Nathan still asks about her sometimes. And unlike Marcus, he doesn't hide behind some modest lifestyle like a martyr. I backed away before they saw me. My ears were burning. My throat felt tight. It wasn't just disdain anymore. It was active manipulation. Diane didn't just dislike me. She was still holding out hope that Emily would leave me. That night, I didn't bring it up. I didn't tell Emily what I'd heard. I didn't want to ruin Jasper's birthday. But inside, something had cracked. And the cracks only spread. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. I noticed the subtle digs Diane kept slipping into conversations. "It must be hard budgeting when you don't have dual incomes," she said once, not realizing I out-earned Brad and Courtney combined. I caught Brad trying to one-up me in conversations, name-dropping mutual funds and legal loopholes like he thought he was in a financial duel. Courtney started posting passive-aggressive quotes on Facebook like, "True love is transparent love, and some people hide their true selves until it's too late." Emily stayed oblivious. Or maybe she was just tired. Every time I tried to bring up how her family treated me, she'd sigh and say, "I know. I'm sorry. They're just complicated." But one night, about a month later, things came to a head. We were at Diane's again for dinner. Emily's cousin Grace had just gotten engaged, and it was a whole thing. Champagne, toasts, gifts. Grace's fiancé was some real estate guy with slicked back hair and the emotional depth of a garden hose. But Diane treated him like royalty. He owns 2 condos, she gushed at the table. And he's barely 30. That's ambition. Emily squeezed my hand under the table. I let it go. Then, after dessert, Diane pulled Emily aside. I stayed back, chatting with Greg, who, to his credit, was trying to tell me a story about a boat trip from the 80s. But then I heard Emily's voice. Sharp. Unusual for her. Are you serious, Mom? I turned. Emily was standing in the hallway with her arms crossed. Diane looked unfazed. I'm just saying, honey, if you'd been honest about Marcus's finances, we could have worked out something better for your future. This isn't how our family operates. Worked out something better? Emily echoed. Are you hearing yourself? Diane's tone didn't change. It's not about love, darling. Love fades. Security doesn't. And frankly, I'm starting to think Marcus is hiding something bigger. You deserve to know everything. I stepped into the hallway. Funny, I said, because I seem to remember inviting you both to sign an NDA when I took over the restaurant and gave you access to our tasting events. You remember that, right, Diane? Her eyes widened. That was just paperwork. No, I said calmly. That was legal paperwork, which you signed, and which means the next time you insinuate that I'm lying about finances, I can, legally, revoke your access to anything I own. Emily looked at me in shock. Wait, what tasting events? I turned to her. We've been doing private dinners for charity. Monthly. High-profile guests. I didn't bring it up because I wanted one part of my life not to be picked apart by your family. There was a long pause. Then Diane scoffed. See? He is hiding things. And that's when Emily said it. She looked at her mother, then at me, then back at her mother. And she said, Mom, did you really invite Nathan to our wedding? After we sent the guest list. Diane flinched. That silence told us everything. And just like that, it all made sense. Emily didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The way she asked the question, calm, direct, almost like she already knew the answer, landed heavier than a scream ever could. I watched Diane's perfectly done face twitch slightly, as if trying to hold together a crumbling mask. You're being ridiculous, Diane finally muttered, looking away. It was just a courtesy. Nathan sent flowers when he heard about the wedding. I thought it would be polite to include him. That's all. That's all. Emily said, arms crossed. After everything? You tried to sneak my ex into our wedding like it was your high school reunion. I didn't sneak anyone, Diane snapped. He RSVP'd no. Nothing even happened. But you wanted it to, Emily said, her voice cracking just a little. You wanted him there. At my wedding. Sitting in a chair that should have gone to someone who actually cared about us. The room had gone quiet. Greg had stopped halfway through pouring himself another scotch. Even Courtney looked like she wasn't quite sure where to stand. Brad had conveniently wandered off to check his phone in the guest bathroom. I've always wanted what's best for you, Diane said, lifting her chin. No, Emily said. You've always wanted what made you look good. And Marcus never fit that picture. I was still standing in the hallway, stunned. Not because I didn't know Diane was capable of this. Honestly, a part of me had suspected for years, but because Emily was finally seeing it. Not brushing it off. Not excusing it. Seeing it, raw and in front of her, for what it really was. We didn't stay long after that. Emily grabbed her coat without another word. Diane tried to guilt trip her on the way out. You're going to abandon your own mother over this? But the words didn't land like they used to. Emily didn't speak the whole drive home. And I didn't push. I just drove, quietly, letting the night wrap itself around us, cold and sharp like the first breath of winter. When we got home, she sat on the couch in silence for a long time. I made us tea. She didn't drink hers. Finally, she said, I feel like I've been blind. I sat beside her. You weren't. You just wanted to believe the best. I defended her for years, she said. Even when I saw the signs. Even when you tried to tell me. I thought it was easier to keep the peace. I thought that's what family did. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought too. She turned to me, eyes glassy. Marcus, I'm sorry for letting it get this far. You don't have to apologize. Yes, I do, she interrupted. Because you've been carrying this weight alone. I saw the little comments, the favoritism, the comparisons. And I told myself it wasn't a big deal. But it was. And it hurt you. And I didn't protect you. I should have. I didn't respond right away. Because there wasn't anything to say. She was right. And the truth is, I had been hurt. I'd just gotten good at hiding it. Laughing it off. Biting my tongue until it bled. I told myself I was being the bigger person, but in reality, I was just shrinking myself down to fit into a family that never wanted me there in the first place. That night, we decided to take some space. Not from each other, from them. We stopped going to every Sunday dinner. Stopped replying to Diane's just checking in texts that always came with strings attached. Emily started saying no more often. I started breathing deeper. It was liberating for a while. But here's the thing about family toxicity. It doesn't go away quietly. Over the next few months, Diane escalated. It started subtly, passive-aggressive comments on Facebook about daughters who forget their roots, photos of Courtney and Brad's family dinners with captions like, "True family always shows up." Then it got more direct. Calls to Emily's office under the guise of urgent family matters that turned out to be rants about how she was letting Marcus isolate her, or how marriage is supposed to be a partnership with your parents, too. Then came the final straw. Emily and I had finally booked our dream vacation. A quiet 2-week trip to Portugal, something we'd been putting off for years. We planned every detail. I cleared my freelance schedule, and Emily submitted time off for the first time in over a year. It was supposed to be ours. 2 days before the trip, Emily got a voicemail from Courtney. "She's in the hospital," Courtney said, crying. "It's Mom. She collapsed in the kitchen. They think it's her heart." We panicked. Emily broke down in tears. I called the airline. We canceled everything. Bags still half-packed on the bed. We jumped in the car and drove to the hospital, running every red light on the way. When we arrived, out of breath, frantic, we found Diane sitting upright in bed, eating a cup of Jell-O and arguing with a nurse about the room temperature. Turns out, it wasn't her heart. It was a dizzy spell, mild dehydration. She was cleared for discharge that same night. And the worst part? She smiled when she saw us. A smug little smile. "Oh good," she said. "You came." Emily stood frozen. "You lied." "I didn't lie," Diane said. Courtney overreacted. "I just told her I felt faint. You know how she is. But it's lovely that you came. It shows where your priorities still are." I walked out of that room before I said something I'd regret. Emily followed a few minutes later, pale and silent. We sat in the car for a long time. "I gave up our vacation for this," she whispered. She manipulated me. I didn't say anything. I just held her hand. That was rock bottom. The moment we realized we could never go back to who we were before. That our kindness would always be weaponized. That playing nice only gave them more ammo. That night, we made a decision. We would stop reacting and start building. We quietly cut ties. No more explanations. No more polite justifications. No announcements on social media. Just silence. We changed our numbers. Emily blocked her mother and sister. We moved her work email to a protected contact list. We told our closest friends and allies the truth, not the dramatized version Diane spun, but the quiet, honest facts. And then, we started over. It wasn't a dramatic transformation. There was no montage. Just small, steady steps. Emily started therapy. She'd never done it before, always thought she didn't need it. But she found a counselor who specialized in family trauma and began unpacking years of internalized guilt, perfectionism, and emotional gaslighting. Week by week, I saw her stand taller, smile more, laugh like she used to. I threw myself into work, not to escape, but to create. I expanded the restaurant. We opened a small upstairs lounge with live jazz on weekends. I partnered with a local charity to host monthly fundraisers. I hired young chefs with talent but no connections, people who reminded me of myself. And I started saying yes to interviews, podcasts, local business panels. For the first time, I let people know who I was. Not for vanity, but because I was done hiding. 6 months later, Emily launched her own project. She left her marketing job and opened a boutique creative agency. Just 2 clients to start, then 5, then 10. She worked from home at first, then moved into a shared office space. I watched her rediscover her spark. We were no longer surviving. We were rising. And here's the thing, they noticed. Diane didn't stay quiet for long. She sent a long email months later. Half apology, half guilt trip. Talking about how family is all we have in the end, and how she just wanted the best for her daughters. Emily didn't respond. Courtney tried next. She showed up at our restaurant during lunch service with Jasper in tow, hoping the kids' presence would soften us. I told her politely that I couldn't chat during rush hour. Brad emailed a cease and desist after he saw that Emily was using a marketing strategy that looked suspiciously similar to something his firm once pitched to a client. We laughed and forwarded it to our lawyer. It was messy, but it was ours. We were no longer living in their shadow. We were building something brighter. And yet, the story wasn't over. Not even close. Because one day, out of nowhere, a legal envelope landed on our doorstep. Addressed to Emily. From Diane's estate planner. That's when everything took a sharp left turn. And what we discovered inside that envelope changed everything. Emily stood in the doorway holding the envelope like it was radioactive. She hadn't opened it yet. It had arrived in an unmarked legal courier envelope with only one return address. North Creek Estate and Trust Management. No note. No explanation. Just her name on the label in crisp, clean font and the faint scent of overpaid legal drama clinging to the seal. She turned to me with a look I hadn't seen on her face in a long time. Not fear. Not sadness. Not anger, even. It was something colder. Sharper. Curiosity, laced with caution. I don't know what this is, she said, walking into the kitchen. But I already hate it. I dried my hands on a towel and nodded toward the letter opener. Want me to do it? She hesitated, then handed it to me. Inside was a single sheet of paper, heavy stock, thick enough to feel serious. The heading was short. Notice of intent to amend living trust. Diane M. Whitmore. Emily read it once. Then again. Slower. And then she burst out laughing. But it wasn't the good kind of laugh. It was the kind you let out when the absurdity of something slams into your chest so hard you forget how to breathe. She's revoking my beneficiary status, Emily said, shaking her head. This woman is actually writing me out of her trust. I blinked. Wait, you were in her trust. Emily sighed and sat down. Yeah, ages ago. When Dad had that health scare, Mom redid all the estate planning. She put Courtney and me in as 50-50 beneficiaries. I haven't thought about it in years. Why now? I asked. What's the timing here? Emily held up the notice. It says she's reconsidering the distribution of her assets due to recent familial estrangement and poor judgment exhibited by her youngest daughter in the selection of a life partner. My jaw clenched. So this is because she didn't get her way. Oh, Emily said, reaching into the envelope again. It gets better. There was a second page. A revised draft of Diane's trust structure. Courtney, 90% beneficiary. Jasper, 10%. Emily, removed entirely. At the bottom, there was a handwritten postscript. One line. This doesn't have to be permanent, darling. But some choices have consequences. Emily stared at it for a long time. I expected tears. Or yelling. Or at the very least, a drink. But she did something else entirely. She folded the letter back up. Neatly. Carefully. Slid it into the envelope, and placed it in the drawer next to our sink. Then she turned to me and said, she just gave me the perfect out. From that moment on, everything shifted. Emily had always been composed, organized, methodical, but something about that letter awakened a part of her I'd never seen before. Not rage, not revenge in the screaming, soap opera sense. No, it was clarity. The kind of quiet, patient resolve that doesn't just wait for karma, it builds it. Brick by brick. She wants to cut me out, she said that night, pacing in the living room. Fine, but I want to know why. I want to see everything she's been hiding. What she gave Courtney. What she promised Brad. What leverage she's been holding over us this entire time. So you want to fight it? I asked. No, Emily said, stopping mid-step. I want to understand it. Then I want to expose it. That was the beginning of the setup. Step 1, knowledge. We hired a trust and estate attorney. Someone who specialized in family estate conflicts. His name was Calvin, and he looked like he'd walked out of a courtroom drama on primetime television. Silver hair, razor-sharp posture, a voice like silk on steel. He reviewed the trust amendment and said, this was meant to provoke you. It's a power play, but it also opens doors. She made it official. That gives us rights. Rights to what? Emily asked. Discovery, Calvin replied. If she's made you a formal beneficiary in the past and is now revising the trust with cause, we can request access to previous documents. We can also examine asset distribution patterns, family gifts, and disbursements to other beneficiaries. That means Courtney. That means Brad. Emily's eyes narrowed. We'll need proof. Don't worry, Calvin said, leaning back. Entitled people always leave a trail. Over the next 6 weeks, we built our case. Courtney had always lived a lifestyle a few tiers above her pay grade. She worked part-time at a nonprofit and Brad's firm was successful, but not European vacation every 3 months, matching Otis in the driveway successful. Turns out, Diane had been funneling money to them for years. Quietly, through early inheritance disbursements, educational gifts for Jasper, and family equity transfers. And while Emily had received the occasional birthday check or holiday sweater, Courtney had received $150,000 toward their down payment, a $25,000 wedding bonus, $60,000 in investment capital for Brad's firm, multiple emergency transfers totaling over $80,000 over the last 3 years. All of this came to light through Calvin's discovery filings and a financial forensics specialist he brought on board. And that was just the money. We also learned that Diane had added Courtney and Brad as medical and financial power of attorney for her estate without ever consulting Emily. The implication was clear. Diane had been preparing to erase Emily for a long time. But the real revelation came from an email. A single, foolishly forwarded message Diane had sent to her estate manager. I need to know if we can remove Emily entirely and reroute her portion through Jasper. That way I'm not cutting her off completely, and it'll look more fair on paper. I want to keep the family image intact for now. That was it. The mask had slipped. She didn't just want to punish Emily. She wanted to stage manage the punishment. Emily sat at the kitchen island holding the printed email, a flicker of something unreadable on her face. She doesn't just hate you, she whispered. She resents me for not hating you, too. I swallowed. So what do we do? She looked at me, and for the first time in our entire relationship, I saw her smile with absolute, unapologetic intent. We let her finish building the gallows, she said, and then we pull the trapdoor ourselves. Step 2, control. I reached out to one of my investors, Liam, a tech entrepreneur turned angel backer I'd partnered with years ago. He owed me a favor. When I told him what we were planning, he laughed. You want to go full succession on your in-laws? He asked. Not exactly, I said, but I need to make them see the power they've been dismissing. Liam connected me with a private venue he co-owned, an exclusive estate in Lake Forest used for high-profile retreats and charity events. White stone walls, ivy-covered terraces, and a catering staff that made you weep into your truffle risotto. We booked it under a generic name, Whitmore Family Foundation Gala. Step 3, the bait. Emily reached out to Courtney under a burner email account, claimed to be a publicist working with the foundation's charitable wing, invited her and Brad to a private family feature opportunity for an upcoming philanthropic spotlight series, said they'd be honored at the event for their ongoing service to the community. Diane got her own invitation, printed and hand-delivered, with a note that said, because every family deserves to be seen for who they truly are. They all RSVP'd yes within 48 hours. Courtney posted about it on Instagram the next day, filtered photo of her holding the invite next to a bottle of Veuve, captioned, Family always rises to the top. Step 4, the stage. While they were busy preparing speeches and outfit changes, we were preparing documents. Every financial transfer, every manipulative message, every proof of favoritism, betrayal, coercion, and gaslighting, all printed, bound, and slipped into discreet envelopes labeled with their names. We worked with the event staff to time everything perfectly. Arrival cocktails, a private family honoring ceremony, a brief, closed-door moment for media materials review. That's when they'd each receive their envelope. That's when the room would change. And that's when Emily would stand at the front and take back the narrative. Not with vengeance, not with fury, but with truth. We weren't going to burn the bridge. We were going to make sure everyone saw who set the fire. The night of the gala arrived cloaked in elegance. The estate we'd rented shimmered in soft amber light, with violinists playing near the fountain and staff in crisp black uniforms guiding guests toward the arched entry. You wouldn't have guessed that behind the charm and catering, revenge was about to be served, cold, meticulous, and years in the making. Courtney showed up first, draped in a pearl-studded gown that probably cost more than my car's down payment. Brad had that same smug grin he always wore when he thought he was the smartest guy in the room. They were followed closely by Diane, decked out in a tailored navy dress and diamond earrings that glinted like ice under the chandelier light. She was glowing with self-importance, clearly thinking this event was a tribute to her legacy as matriarch. None of them suspected a thing. Their names were on the guest list. Their photos were in the mock-up program. They'd even received a framed honoree certificate at check-in with gold lettering and their names etched beneath a quote about the power of family-driven philanthropy. They mingled. They drank. They posed for photos. And then the event host stepped up to the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening for the Whitmore Family Foundation Gala. Before our public program begins, we'll be holding a brief private segment with the family in the Rosewood Room. We ask that the Whitmore family members follow staff for this exclusive media preparation. They followed, smiling, oblivious. Inside the Rosewood Room, soft jazz played in the background and champagne waited on a tray. Emily stood by the fireplace, calm and poised in a black dress, minimal jewelry, hair pinned up like a queen preparing for court. On the mahogany table beside her sat 3 sealed envelopes, labeled clearly, Diane, Courtney, Brad. Diane raised a sculpted brow. What's all this? Emily gestured toward the chairs. Please, take a seat. Brad narrowed his eyes. Where's the film crew? Emily looked him in the eye. There is no film crew. There's no magazine. There's no charitable profile. Courtney's face went pale. Then what is this? Emily reached for the remote and turned off the music. The silence that followed was the kind that amplifies everything. The creak of a chair, the shuffle of fabric, the pounding of your own heart. Then she spoke. This isn't about honoring our family. This is about telling the truth. About years of manipulation, gaslighting, and favoritism. About how this family treats people like investments instead of human beings. About how you tried to punish me for choosing a partner who didn't meet your warped standards. Diane folded her arms. I don't have time for this performance. You don't need time, Emily said coolly. You need to open your envelope. She handed them out one by one. They hesitated, but curiosity always wins with people like them. Inside were the documents Calvin had compiled, spreadsheets showing every financial disbursement from Diane's accounts to Courtney and Brad. Totals well over $300,000. Bank records. The email Diane had sent about rerouting Emily's inheritance through Jasper to keep up appearances. Handwritten notes between Diane and her estate planner about omitting Emily as a co-trustee until she comes to her senses. But that wasn't the real bomb. The final sheet in each envelope was a notarized statement of withdrawal. Emily's formal, legal relinquishment of any future inheritance from Diane's estate. Signed, sealed, and witnessed. Diane's hands trembled as she read the last line. I voluntarily and permanently waive my right to any assets, property, or claims tied to the Whitmore family estate. She looked up. What is this? Emily didn't flinch. Freedom. You're just giving it up? Courtney sputtered. After everything? That money was half yours. It was never mine, Emily said. Because it came with chains. Expectations. Control. And I'm done. Brad laughed. You're bluffing. Emily turned to him. Check with your attorney. The withdrawal was filed last week. Courtney looked furious. So what? You throw this tantrum and walk away. You think this makes you look noble? Emily tilted her head. No, but that's not the end of it. I stepped forward from the corner where I'd been quiet until now. Diane's eyes darted to me like she'd just remembered I existed. Do you remember the charity gala you hosted back in 2019? I asked her. The one where you bragged about raising 6 figures for underprivileged youth. Diane blinked. Yes, of course. I handed her another envelope. This is the breakdown of the actual donations made that year. Less than $8,000 went to charity. The rest went to administrative fees, to Brad's consulting firm. Brad's face drained of color. That's privileged information. No, I interrupted. It's public. Because I bought the holding company that handled your bookkeeping software last month. Legally. And I found a lot of discrepancies. Emily stepped beside me. You funneled funds from a charity event to pay your own son-in-law. Then you framed it as philanthropy. Courtney stood up. This is insane. You can't just ruin our reputations over some bitterness. No one's ruining anything, I said. We're just letting the truth stand where your lies used to. Emily held up a small USB drive. This contains everything. The documents, the transfers, the emails. It's not going to the press. Not unless you try to retaliate. But understand this. We're not afraid of you anymore. Diane slowly sat down. Her face had gone stone still. No rage. No denial. just a quiet realization that the game was over. You'll regret this, she said, her voice hoarse. Emily smiled. I already regretted staying quiet for so long. But this? No. This is the first thing I don't regret in years. They left soon after, barely able to make eye contact. Courtney didn't post a single photo from that night. Brad's firm quietly removed its philanthropic partnerships tab from their website within a week. Diane went dark on social media. And us? We didn't gloat. We didn't brag. We just lived. Emily went on to expand her agency, partnering with nonprofits and ethical companies, real ones. I opened a second restaurant, this time a bakery cafe in the heart of the city, dedicated to my mother's favorite recipes. We named it Rosewood, after the room where we took back control. Sometimes I still get looks from people who know the story, business owners, family friends who caught wind of what happened. They ask me if I'd do it all again. And I always say the same thing. I never wanted revenge. I just wanted peace. But sometimes, to get peace, you have to end the war yourself. And that night, we ended it forever.